Let's start with something fundamental. When an older man notices a younger woman smiling at him, his immediate reaction is confusion. Why is she looking at me like that? He assumes it must be some kind of joke, a trick, or an accident, but that's where he's wrong. See, human attraction isn't just about youth and beauty. It's about competence, and competence comes with time. There's something deeply misunderstood about attraction, especially by men who have lived long enough to believe they've become invisible. They assume that the attention they once received in their youth has permanently faded, that women, especially younger women, have no interest in them beyond politeness. But that assumption is fundamentally flawed. See, human attraction isn't just about youth or physical beauty, it's about competence. And competence is something that, in most cases, only time and experience can refine. Let's break this down. The young man in his early 20s is still in the process of becoming. He's trying to figure out who he is, what he wants, and where he fits in the world. His mind is clouded with uncertainty, his self-esteem is fragile, and his energy is often scattered. He hasn't yet developed the ability to command his own emotions, let alone lead anyone else with confidence. A man in his 40s or 50s, on the other hand, has likely weathered life storms. He's experienced loss, hardship, and responsibility. He has learned through suffering and built himself into something stronger. If he has spent his years wisely, he has developed a level of control over his own emotions, decisions, and future. He is no longer lost. He knows what he stands for, and that is rare. Women, particularly younger women, are biologically and psychologically drawn to competence because it represents security. And I don't mean financial security, though that certainly plays a role. I mean psychological security, the sense that a man knows how to handle himself, how to respond to challenges, how to remain calm in the face of adversity. That level of certainty, that self-possession, is incredibly appealing because it stands in contrast to the instability that often defines young adulthood. It's important to recognize that this attraction isn't necessarily romantic or even consciously intentional. It's a natural response to a rare quality in men, a quality that younger men often lack. When a younger woman smiles at an older man, it's not necessarily because she wants him in a romantic sense, but because she recognizes something in him that she doesn't see in her peers. This is where so many older men go wrong. They assume that once they've lost their youthful looks, they've lost their value. But this is the thinking of a man who has only ever relied on surface-level attributes to gain attention. In reality, a man's most attractive qualities, his wisdom, his confidence, his ability to remain composed, are cultivated over decades. They're not things a 20-year-old can fake. And this is why younger women notice older men in a way that older men themselves often fail to recognize. It's because they see something stable, something solid. In a world filled with uncertainty and impulsivity, that kind of presence stands out. Confidence is not something you can manufacture overnight. It's not a trick, a gimmick, or a carefully rehearsed set of behaviors. Real confidence is the result of competence, and competence takes time to develop. This is why so many younger men struggle with self-assurance. They haven't yet built enough experience to truly trust themselves. They might mimic confidence, adopting the right posture, the right tone of voice, or the right set of social tricks. But underneath it all, there is still uncertainty. You can see this play out in every social situation. A younger man walks into a room and immediately scans for validation. He wants to be noticed, to be acknowledged. He adjusts his behavior to fit what he thinks people want from him. He might exaggerate his achievements, speak a little louder than necessary, or try to dominate a conversation to prove his worth. This isn't confidence, it's insecurity wrapped in bravado. Now compare that to a man who has lived long enough to know who he is. He doesn't walk into a room looking for approval. He doesn't need to prove anything because he has already proven it to himself. He knows what he's capable of, and he doesn't seek permission to exist in his own skin. That's the difference. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't need to be announced. It simply exists. And people, especially women, notice. Younger women in particular are drawn to this quality, often without fully understanding why. It's because true confidence creates an atmosphere of certainty. A man who is sure of himself makes others feel safe. He doesn't react emotionally to small inconveniences. He doesn't shift his personality based on who he's talking to. He carries himself with a quiet assurance that signals he knows how to handle himself and, by extension, the people around him. This is an important distinction. Many younger men believe confidence is about being dominant, about controlling situations or asserting themselves aggressively. But that isn't confidence. It's compensation. Real confidence doesn't need to force itself onto others. It doesn't need to make a scene. Instead, it's about presence. It's about knowing that you belong wherever you are, not because you demand it, but because you have earned it. And this is where older men have a natural advantage. They have had time to develop this presence. They have experienced enough failure, enough hardship, and enough success to understand what truly matters. They no longer waste energy seeking approval. Instead, they focus on what is real, what they can control, what they can build, and what they can offer. That kind of self-assurance is magnetic. When a younger woman smiles at an older man, it's often because she recognizes something in him that is rare among her peers. It's not necessarily about wealth, looks, or status, though those things can play a role. More often, it's about the way he carries himself, the way he speaks with conviction, the way he doesn't need to fill silence with nervous chatter, the way he remains composed under pressure. That level of certainty is powerful, and it is something that cannot be faked. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about the way men age and how they are perceived by women, particularly younger women. Many men assume that as they grow older, they fade into the background, that their value in the eyes of women diminishes with time. But this belief only holds if a man has spent his years passively, letting time happen to him rather than using it to forge himself into something stronger. Because here's the truth. Maturity, when cultivated properly, doesn't just attract, it commands respect. Young men are often preoccupied with proving themselves. They seek validation through external achievements, social status, or physical prowess. They feel the need to impress, to perform, to establish themselves as worthy in the eyes of others. And while this is a natural stage of development, it also reveals a certain instability. A young man is still in the process of becoming. His confidence is untested, his emotions are volatile, and his sense of self is fragile. He may posture as if he has everything figured out, but beneath the surface, there is doubt. Contrast this with a man who has allowed experience to shape him into something solid. He has seen enough of life to know what matters and what doesn't. He has learned that his worth is not contingent on how many people approve of him. He understands that seeking external validation is a game that never ends, and he has opted out. He stands firm, not because he is trying to be impressive, but because he no longer needs to prove himself, and that presence alone commands attention. This is why women, especially younger women, respond to older men in a way that younger men often don't understand. It's not just about attraction in a romantic sense, it's about respect. A man who has developed emotional stability, intellectual depth, and the ability to navigate life with composure is a rare commodity. Younger women recognize this, even if they can't always articulate why. There is a misconception that women are primarily drawn to physical attributes in men, and while physical attraction plays a role, it is far from the defining factor. What truly captures attention is presence. A man who walks into a room with quiet self-assurance, who does not seek attention yet effortlessly holds it, who speaks with conviction rather than volume, this is a man who is taken seriously. He doesn't need to make himself appear powerful because he simply is. And this is where so many men go wrong. They believe that as they age, they become less desirable because they compare themselves to their younger selves rather than recognizing the power that comes with maturity. They fail to see that their ability to remain composed under pressure, to make decisions with wisdom rather than impulse, and to handle conflict without emotional outbursts makes them far more formidable than they ever were in their youth. Women respect a man who is unshaken by trivial matters. They notice when a man listens more than he speaks, when he carries himself with quiet authority rather than performative bravado. They recognize when a man does not need their approval to feel valuable, but still carries himself in a way that earns admiration. This is why maturity, when properly developed, is not just attractive, it is commanding. Men like us. It sets a man apart not only from his younger self, but from the majority of other men around him.